So before we get to Mollie, let's get to the big three.
Number 3.
And President Trump, being President Trump and a New Yorker, basically said, I want to meet again, in the next few days, and I want a handshake that you promise you're going to release these things. And so really the purpose of the meeting today is to make sure that they're serious.
Trust and expect them to cheat, but get the China trade deal done as top U.S. and China officials start day 2 of the intense talks over in London. Why China might need this deal more than us, I'll explain.
Number 2.
On Elon Musk, do you plan to speak to him on the phone anytime soon?
I haven't really thought about it, actually. I would imagine he wants to speak to me. I would think so. If I were him, I'd want to speak to me.
Musk versus Trump, the Cold War begins to thaw, defrost, what's happening, and where I see the Titan battle going.
Number 1.
Are Democrats out of touch on this issue?
Well, I think if you did the polling in Los Angeles, I'm not sure it would be that way, considering we are a city of immigrants. But do people really approve the federal government coming in and seizing power?
Maybe. L.A. riots, day 4 and counting, as Marines are about to join the National Guard and some L.A. cops to suppress the organized violence versus ICE and government officials. Your choice. Side with the law or an order or the left-wing illegal immigrant anarchy, and let's see what works. Remember, there was a school of thought early on, I guess the Mitt Romney era, when if you were hard on the border and talked about cracking down on immigrants, people would say, wow, that's a turnoff to Hispanics. That ship has sailed. Am I right, Mollie Hemingway?
Oh, completely true. What we're dealing with in the last decade of just massive immigration, illegal immigration and legal immigration, but the illegal immigration in particular, where you have so many bad effects on communities throughout the country, it just is, people are anxious for serious action to be taken to return the country to the citizens.
So if you look at it, 54%, a CBS poll, 54% are for President Trump's deportation policies, 54%, which is amazing in this polarized environment.
Well, and perhaps more importantly, it's like 86% of Republicans and again, like 54% of independents. Among Democrats, however, it's very small. And so you're seeing a massive divide on an issue that politically goes to Republicans' favor. People want rule of law. I heard you play that clip where someone said, we are a nation of immigrants. And that's not actually the right way to say it. We're a nation of citizens. We are American citizens. First rule of citizenship is following the rule of law. And so when you say, oh, we're actually a nation of immigrants, meaning by that person, illegal immigrants, that's just not true. That's not who we are, and that's not who Americans want us to be.
All right, so here's what Karen Bass said, the mayor of New York, says basically we're arresting or we're detaining too many people. Cut 7.
These are not the people that we were told were going to be detained. And it makes me feel like our city is actually a test case for what happens when the federal government moves in and takes the authority away from the state or away from local government. I don't think that our city should be used for an experiment to see what happens in the nation's second largest city. Well, maybe we can do this to other cities.
I don't even know what she's talking about, but she thinks as though instead of going after criminals, she thinks they're going after too many other illegal immigrants.
Well, what's interesting is these riots actually began not in response to a traditional raid on criminal illegal aliens, but actually high target people who are about to be charged, according to Tom Homan in an interview this week, with being part of the cartel control of our southern border. So they were working to make action against the Mexican cartels for criminal conspiracy. So she's kind of right that this isn't traditional. But what does it say that when they started going after the cartels is when these riots started happening? And again, that's the kind of thing you're going to need to do if you truly want to take control of our southern border, is to kind of go to war against these Mexican cartels that currently control it.
And you know what the message, Mollie, is? Oh, yeah, they're going after the handyman hanging out at Home Depot on a split rail fence looking to work for $20 a day.
Well, first off, I think that messaging point from Democrats isn't even as strong as they think it is. It's true that the Trump administration is going after the worst criminals, the rapists, the murderers first. But actually, everyone who breaks the law has broken the law. And a lot of Americans understand that the millions of people here, it doesn't mean all of them are murderers or rapists, but anyone who breaks the law violates the civil contract that makes our society cohesive. And so it's not as, sympathetic, I think, as Democrats want to make it out.
So there was some unrest in Dallas and Boston yesterday. Do you fear or do you feel as though it could happen in a place like where we're in now in New York, in D.C.?
I think it's important that people recognize that these riots are in fact organized and they are intended to break out nationwide by this weekend. So people should expect riots nationwide by this weekend. It's a little bit different than the organized BLM riots of 2020, in which people were a little less prepared for it. But now people kind of understand that the left has this overarching organizational structure with funding, with game plans. And so they have said they would like the riots to go nationwide. And so I would be surprised if they didn't.
So in New York, Mayor Adams says he's ready. Cut 10.
I understand that some New Yorkers may be angry, afraid, and ready to express that. New York City will always be a place to peacefully protest, but we will not allow violence and lawlessness. The escalation of protests in Los Angeles over the last couple of days is unacceptable and will not be tolerated if attempted in our city.
But really, I mean, if there's still no cooperation between ICE and the NYPD, technically, do you take him at his word, or could you see it happening here?
It's just interesting that he's even speaking this way. I don't know. It'll be saying things is one thing, and actually behaving as if you take violent riots seriously is entirely another. Now, again, during previous protest movements, one of the things that kind of worked in the activists' favor is that they would have a large number of peaceful protesters who kind of stood between the police and the violent rioters and worked as a shield. I don't know if you're going to see as much of that. I think that's what the left is trying to gin up right now is that kind of thing that protects some of the violent people from being held accountable. But again, it is a completely different world. People saw what happened in 2020 when there were arson and looting and murders, all associated with the violence of the extreme part of the BLM riots. And I don't think they're as favorable toward that now, particularly because the issue itself is one where a large percentage of Americans say we need to do something to get control of having a country run by citizens and not illegals.
What do you think President Trump took out of his first term that plays into how quick he actually got the National Guard in term this time?
Well, we know from multiple reporting that he actually wanted to crack down on the rioters during the BLM riots. It was a very politically dangerous time for him. It's at the height of COVID. Already he's being attacked on all sides. And so he kind of held back. And he was also told that to do that would hurt him politically. I think he realized that he should have been much stronger against the worst parts of those riots, that it in fact led to not just his election loss, but maybe some of the response of his own supporters in the early part of the next year, thinking that they would not be held accountable for the riots that they saw the left engage in nationwide. And it was just a big mess. So I think he's much more inclined to restore rule of law and law and order.
The one thing I'd say, he's definitely sure of himself. This is a decision he wanted to make. He doesn't look like he's wrestling with it. But Rachel Maddow, even if you don't agree, I never really question her intelligence. I've never seen somebody with a worse take. Cut 13.
We have never seen a president less politically skilled, less politically equipped than this one to turn that kind of problem around. And so he has panicked. He is trying to hit the eject button. Somebody convinced this president that attacking immigrants would work for him politically. He has no idea what to do with the sustained and growing and intractable and indomitable protest and opposition of the American people against him. And so he has decided to try to fix it by using the army. Sure. Game over, big guy, you lose.
What do I say to that?
Okay. Again, this is an indication that she really needs to talk to more people. So when Trump was elected in 2016, even before he was inaugurated, you did see large American protest movements on behalf of illegal immigrants. They were taking over airports. It was very well organized, and it was real. That is not what we're dealing with now. We have had, since 2016, how many millions of people being welcomed to break the law, coming over the border illegally or staying in the country illegally, and Americans have had enough. So it's just not the same environment. Like it might be in the studio at MSNBC, but it's not in the rest of the country.
Right. At the very least, to even listen to a podcast, that's not hers. Here is Howard Enton. He's the flamboyant pollster on CNN. Cut 20.
If we just take a look at the baseline numbers here, this is Trump's net approval rating on immigration. It's gone up like a rocket. In his first term, Trump was way, way, way underwater at minus 21 points. But look at this. He's up over 20 points. Now, in the aggregate, he is in positive territory at plus 1 point on his net approval rating. Some other polls even have it a little bit higher than that. While Trump's administration's program to deport those here illegally. Look at this, 54% approval. How about agents searching your hometown for those that they think are here illegally? Again, positive territory here, above 50% for Donald Trump. No matter what poll you look at, no matter which way you cut it, the American public is with the Republicans. The American public is with Donald Trump.
What do you say that? A CNN pollster. Does she even get CNN in her office? I mean, did you just don't even put on Fox. Just look at that.
Or just look at the last
CBS.
election where we saw polling that indicated this was a big issue.
Yeah.
It's also been a big issue for Americans for a long time on both left and right. You take people like Bernie Sanders who tapped into this for a long time until Trump. People already weren't as keen on rampant immigration, particularly illegal, as many of our elites were. But now that I saw a recent analysis showing that 1 in 4 public school students might be here as part of an illegal family. You're seeing greater expense, whether it's at hospitals, schools, in traffic court, everywhere. People think that we have been more than generous, and that particularly when it comes to illegal immigration, enough is enough.
Who's paying for this? Who's paying for the robo-taxis that are no longer going to be affordable and convenient to come to your house? Who's paying for the Hispanic businesses that have been defiled and looted in the case of the Verizon store or the dress factory or Foot Locker that was just looted? So most of them are Hispanic-run or Hispanic-owned businesses. Use your head. When we come back, I want to talk to Mollie about what's going on with Elon Musk and the President of the United States, also the big, beautiful bill. Does this help or hurt it? Because there's huge provisions for more money for ICE and more money for the wall and immigration enforcement. Back in a moment.
There was this New York Times report that he did not want to talk about, Elon Musk, that alleged that he, towards the end of his time in the White House, was blurring the lines between recreational use of drugs and medicinal. Do you think he ever had drugs here at the White House?
I really don't know. I don't think so. I hope not. Look, I wish him well. You understand. We had a good relationship, and I just wish him well. Very well, actually.
And that is President Trump. And then that was retweeted in some type of emoji for Musk afterwards. And there's been almost no contention coming from Musk, negativity coming from Musk since the meltdown. With me right now is Mollie Hemingway. A few more minutes. Fox News contributor. She's also with the Federalist. Mollie, where do you think this is heading?
I think that they will probably continue to have a fine relationship, meaning everything was crazy last week. Yes. Clearly, Elon was very distraught over his time working in the government. It was to be expected. This is a man who, say what you want about him. He has a lot of personal demons. He has a lot of problems. He's also just an amazing man. He's built all these major businesses, and he's done it in part by just seeing a problem and solving the problem. So he gets to the government and he sees, oh, wow, we have all of this horrific waste, fraud, abuse, and we could easily fix it. And he's thinking that the problem was that people didn't know about it. And then he realizes, oh, actually, Washington, D.C. exists to perpetuate waste, fraud, abuse, inefficiency. And it kind of broke him for a bit. Now, presumably, he'll come out of it on the other side or just return his focus to his private businesses. But I think a lot of people like him, again, despite his many, many faults, which are real. And they wish him well.
Right. How much of the negativity did he absorb for Trump?
Oh, it's actually, I think this is so interesting. We saw with these riots and with the media right now, they have returned to full force anti-Trumpism. And it made you realize, oh, Elon was absorbing so much of that for the early part of the presidency. And now that he's gone, they've just returned to sort of their first term style. And you remember just how difficult it is and how vicious and awful they can be.
Right. Here's a little more from Trump. Will they speak again? That was one thing that he was asked. Cut 26.
On Elon Musk, do you plan to speak to him on the phone anytime soon?
I I haven't really thought about it, actually. I would imagine he wants to speak to me. I would think that. If I were him, I'd want to speak to me, and maybe he was already called. You'd have to ask him whether or not he's already called. But I'd have no problem with it.
What does that mean?
I
He
actually-
probably already called.
No, well, I actually think what he's saying is true there. And what I mean by that is most men in Washington, D.C. are very girly. They're very passive aggressive. If someone slights them, they make a vow in their mind that it might take them 20 years, but they're going to destroy that person. And Trump can be very petty and childish publicly, but if someone, he can easily bury the hatchet. So he's just more extreme and it's all on display. And I think Elon Musk is also that way. And so I don't know if it's his autistic sensibilities or whatever, but I could see them burying the hatchet and moving forward. I think Trump just wanted to make sure Elon knew that his temper tantrum wasn't going to go well for him.
But I mean, the thing is, I predicted that he'd go, my stay in the government has not been fruitful. People haven't been responsive, but allow Trump to say, well, that's his problem. But when he got personal with he should be impeached and the Epstein file, I go, what? I mean, you couldn't be more destructive of a relationship, I don't think, except for maybe he said something about Melania.
Okay, yes, but that's exactly the kind of thing that Trump would do when we were talking about the childish, like petty, ridiculous public insults. It didn't make any sense. He seemed to be juvenile, emotional outbursts. I don't think anyone who knows Elon would look at that and say that man's in a right place right now. And so I just don't think it's going to have long-term damage.
Let's talk about some of the substance. We're in round 2 of the China talks. It seems to be an adult conversation. I don't trust them. I think there's a lot on the line. We've had 3 possible terror attacks, people taking over poisonous fungus or whatever happened to happen. We know about the problems with the colleges and the Chinese presence there. Your thought, and the Chinese spy we just caught working for North Korea, try to keep up with that. What do you think is going to emerge from London?
Well, it does seem like these talks are going well, but even if they go really well, this is just part of a very long process to restrain China, which is a serious adversary. I noticed that they said originally they were only going to be talking for a couple hours today. Then they said, it's actually going to go on all day. I think that's a good sign. I think the fact that they're at the table is a great sign. So much needs to be done, though. It's not just about China's tariffs. It's also about their horrific unfair trade practices and how much they're manipulating things in the global economy. So much to do.
Right. Get the EU on board, that would certainly be formidable. And it looks like we're in a 5-year low in terms of a trade relationship. Mollie, great to see you again. Good luck with the story you're working on, but I can't say anything yet.
Yep, thanks.
I want to share the CBS poll. It shows 54% of Americans approve of the Trump administration's program to deport illegal immigrants. A minority, 46%, disapprove. Are Democrats out of touch on this issue?
Well, I think if you did the polling in Los Angeles, I'm not sure it would be that way, considering we are a city of immigrants. And then people might approve that policy, but do people really approve the federal government coming in and seizing power from a state and from a city? So I drilled down a little further on that poll because I do not believe that Americans support the federal intervention in a city takeover or a state takeover.
Just an embarrassing mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, weighing in on a poll that was done on, they just asked a poll about what they should be doing and who backs who. And guess what? She loses. According to a CBS poll, 54% of the country agree with President Trump's deportation policy. And the unrest happened and the national troops are there because local authorities couldn't control it. How does Senator Joe Manchin feel about it? He went independent at the end, but spent the majority of his career as a Democrat, and he's kind enough to join us from West Virginia. Senator, great to see you. Your reaction from what we're all seeing over the last 4 days and what the mayor said.
It's really a shame and it's disgusting. The bottom line is Americans want a secure border, and Democrats just ought to say we made a mistake. I'm so sorry we made a mistake. We're going to support securing our borders. And we would like for the president and all of our Republican friends to work together as Democrats, as Americans, and find a legal immigration policy that people want to come for the right reason and be able to add to this great country of ours and economies. We're all a nation of immigrants, but we came here and our families and my grandparents came here for the right purpose and the right reason and be productive. And we need to get back to that. But this is awful. We should have never opened the borders up. It has never been asylum at the border. They know that they were wrong and made a big mistake. The problem with the political posturing today, people can't say I made a mistake. I messed up. I'm sorry. And I'll fix it. Let's fix it. And that's what they need to do.
What about the fact that ICE is not protected or communicating with local police? It doesn't happen in West Virginia, but in these sanctuary cities, there's no communication. And that leads to lack of coordination and leads to the destruction of property and could be leading to death and destruction shortly. This can't exist. This sanctuary thing is not American. How do you handle that? Because most of your party is for it.
What happens, in the riots way back in, I remember the riots in 1960s, the Vietnam War, and they started all over the country, but started in major cities, and they spread like wildfire, unfortunately. And a lot of destruction and death was happened during that period of time. We never want to go back to that. So I'm just saying, first of all, law enforcement, judicial process that we have in our country, and rule of law, is for everybody. And the federal government takes the lead on that. I'm a believer of the 10th Amendment, which is states' rights, the Constitution, and basically being a former governor, I understand that. But there's times when you need a show of force. And that shows when the local and the federal government join hands. We will not tolerate this. And this is going to be done and taken care of immediately.
Do you think the president did the right thing sending in the National Guard and didn't check with Governor Newsom first? He felt as though he was totally ineffective and just did it. How do you feel about that?
As a former governor, I never had anybody ever do that to me. They've always contacted me when you have the hurricanes and all that, and they needed assistance from my National Guard. I was always contacted and say, what can you do? Can you give us the support that needs to be done? I would have liked to have seen the president follow that. And his staff should have told him, we're going to reach out to the governor and the governor's office, see if he's receptive, he understands how dire this is, and we're willing to act, and we will act if he doesn't act. That would have been, I think, a little bit more smoother way to do it. Public would have seen he tried everything possible. They didn't want to enforce the law the way it should be enforced, and the president had to do it. But they could have made that gesture.
Senator Fetterman says this: I unapologetically stand for free speech, peaceful demonstrations, immigration, but this is not that. This is anarchy and true chaos. My party loses the moral high ground when we refuse to condemn setting cars on fire, destroying buildings, and assaulting law enforcement. Do you agree with him?
I agree with that. And of course, you're going to have the Democrats come back around and said on January the 6th, the same thing happened. So bottom line is we've got to put a stop to it. The federal government, the president's a leader. He's our president. He's a leader of the free world. He has to show how we can work together, make an effort to try to work together, and then move forward and take the force and use the force that's needed. It's a shame the Democrats cannot come to grips.
Right.
They missed in so many different arenas and issues. And I've said this, the big thing about happening now, the border and the crackdown on crime is what the Americans people have been dying for and requesting and asking for all over the country. So they're going to support aggressive measures. They're going to support basically the federal government and doing what's being done, even though there could be an effort of trying to say, can we work together? But if not, the American people will support this crackdown because they've seen a lack of enforcement for a long period of time, and they're not going to go back to that.
Are you shocked that Governor Newsom hasn't condemned the crime, come out aggressively against the looters and the cars and these robo-taxis that have been exploded?
I can't speak for the governor or his thought process on this or
Right.
I just cannot believe that a majority of Californians believe that this is an overreach. I can't believe that they think that basically we can take care of it ourselves and everything's fine. They've seen what happens when you don't move and move quickly. They're seeing the force of that now, and they're seeing basically that there will be, this will come to an end. There will be peace. This will shut down, but it'd be better and then move forward. But if they can't come to grips, and the federal government's got to say, wait a minute, you might be in my city next. You might be in Chicago. You might be in New York. You might be in Pittsburgh, close to my hometown. So we're not going to let that happen.
Right. I mean, you saw what happened in Kenosha. You saw what happened in Seattle and Portland. The president's not going to tolerate this term. Senator, everyone's talking about Joe Biden and was he really making those decisions? You told us that he was a moderate when you knew him, and you were shocked at who he chose to staff his cabinet with. Do you believe that he was making his decisions, or was whoever worked in the auto pen making the decisions in the last couple of years of the Biden administration, or all 4 years?
Well, I always had a great relationship with Joe Biden for many, many years, and he was always a centrist, moderate, center left, more so than me. but still someone you could work with, make a deal, and move forward. I just thought he lost the will to fight, and I think that basically he had a very aggressive and a very liberal chief of staff, and moving his whole regime further to the left, and just lost the will to fight. That's all I believe. I had cognitive conversations with him when we met, but with that, I didn't see the will to fight. That's what I missed that, and I think that his very liberal staff took over and moved it further left.
When you watched him walk when you watched him talk and you watched him walk, did you think he was all there?
Well, it was challenging. Age was tough. You cannot run mother time. You're just not going to do it, and it was tough. And it was a struggle. Let's put it that way. And I was concerned about that too. We all were. But people asked me, well, you met with him many times. I did. And I always had a lucid conversation. But I did not see the fire in the belly to basically say, I'm going to make my staff do this, 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 this. I think the staff took advantage and saw something different than what some of us saw. So I'm not saying that I'm not hiding anything or covering up. I just think the president lost that will to fight. And when you lose the will to fight and making sure that your administration or basically your staff follows through on what you order them to do, and you follow up on it, they don't, and you reprimand them, things got to happen there. But when they don't think anyone's...
Senator, real quick, we only have 20 seconds, but do you think lost the will or lost the ability to? Was he just not there in the end?
I don't want to think that, but it was very challenging. I can tell you, all of us were shocked, very, very shocked when we saw the debate. That basically said everything that needed to be said.
Gotcha.
It was time to be worried about the president's health more so than anything
We
else.
miss you in Washington, Senator. Thanks so much. Andrew McCarthy joins us now, Fox News contributor, former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, best-selling author. Andy, what about the president's constitutional authority to put National Guard in without the governor's permission? Is he covered?
He's completely covered, Brian. There's no doubt that the president has the authority. In fact, in the Civil War era, the Supreme Court said the president had not only the authority, but the duty to protect the United States against incipient, potentially violent rebellion. And there's no doubt that the president has the authority to protect legitimate constitutional functions of the federal government, federal personnel, and federal facilities. I've actually been, one of the people over the years who said that the states, when the Constitution was adopted, had supremacy in the enforcement of who got to be in their territory and who didn't, and that it was the federal government's role that was dubious. But the fact of the matter is, over the last century, the courts have found that there is not only a federal role in immigration enforcement, but that the federal government is supreme. It's got plenary power over immigration enforcement. Whether you think that's a good development or a bad development, that ship has sailed. It's just, that's the way it is. It's a federal function, and the president gets to execute it and protect it.
For how many days?
For how many days?
Is it 60 days? No.
No. There's no limits on it. There are two sources of authority that he has. So there is some statutory authority, but he's got constitutional authority, even if there were no statutes, to do whatever he has to do to protect the United States and to protect the legitimate functions of the federal government.
So why is it a big decision for him on whether to use the Insurrection Act driven by executive power? Like, why is that a problem? Or technically, did he do that already?
No, he didn't invoke the Insurrection Act. He invoked a different provision of Title X, which allowed him to call up National Guards. But he also deployed, active Marine forces as well, which don't come under in any way state control. And the issue with the state National Guard is that they ordinarily work for the state, but the commander-in-chief is allowed to call them into federal service. The governor should be consulted on that, but the governor doesn't get a veto on it. It's the president's call.
So we're looking now at the Marines standing by from Palm Springs. I'm not sure exactly the division, but not from Pendleton, but 700 standing by. What would have to happen? What would have to happen to allow our fighting force to deploy in the city?
They simply have to be ordered by their
That's it.
commanders to do so. I think the issue, Brian, isn't so much with their presence. The issue with respect to what, the president has to be doing, Secretary of Defense Heggs has to be doing, is being very clear on what the rules of engagement are and what their mission is. What obviously you don't want to have happen is the possibility of a Kent State type tragic mistake that ends up in, being instead of supporting civil order, ends up exacerbating the situation. That's the thing that they want to avoid.
So what is rules of engagement, do you think? They're watching federal buildings now, but they're not necessarily breaking up riots, walking in the street, clearing up the 101 freeway.
Right. I think that they're going to avoid use of lethal force. Obviously, that's going to be something that, as it is with police officers, that you only resort to in the most dire of circumstances. Otherwise, their job is defensive and protection. But on the other hand, if it turns out that the demonstrators and the rioters and the people who are causing all the problems there, if they clog up major arteries or make it otherwise impossible to have civil life in Los Angeles, and particularly for federal government functions to be lawfully carried out, they're going to take measures that are necessary to remove those obstructions.
We're going to see what's going to happen in the next few days and see if things calm down. But the one thing that just drives me crazy, and it just seems so un-American, is that when the LAPD police chief came out and said, I just want to assure the people of Los Angeles, we are not working with ICE. And we will not be coordinating with ICE. Feel secure coming up to us, regardless of your immigration status, to tell us about crime in your area. I mean, that is the genesis of where things went off the rails. Why ICE felt as though they were compelled, that they were about to be overwhelmed, and it took 35 minutes for the LAPD to respond. That is like a family not speaking to each other. Law enforcement have this symbiosis that even if you're in a different city, they just seem to have this special gene where they look out for each other. This doesn't seem like something that should exist in America.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there are periodically throughout our history, there are these third rail issues where the country is divided. I saw Matt Continetti had a great column about this in the Free Press today, I think. But in the 19th century, it was slavery. Before that, there were other economic issues that divided the North and the South. So ordinarily, law enforcement people are going to be law enforcement people, and they're going to be for upholding the law wherever that occurs. Today, our third rail issue is immigration enforcement. It's kind of it's a deep conviction in blue cities and states that the United States shouldn't have borders, and that anybody is welcome to come. I think most of the people in the United States, and now the people who are running the federal government, believe that we have these immigration laws and they have to be enforced, and that the illegal immigration and the collapse of the border security has left a mess of a situation that has to be addressed. But the thing is, the people who put in these sanctuary policies in places like Los Angeles, they didn't spontaneously appear. They got elected by the people of Los Angeles. So the fact is that in some places in the United States, they don't feel the same way about immigration enforcement as you do and I do, and I think probably 70% of the country does.
So I got to ask you this. It's kind of a general question, but the big push right now is to re-examine international students and put a hold on them when it comes to higher education. We find out that 27% of all the students at Harvard are foreign students. The president says that seems too high. I'm worried about it. I'm going to ban foreign students. So Harvard's going to go to court. But it's creating a sense of unrest on a lot of college campuses and an examination of what exactly they're doing here, knowing that the Chinese have this history of spying specifically. What legal grounds is the president standing on now? Or do you think that the schools have the upper hand?
As long as the federal government doesn't engage in constitutionally questionable things like viewpoint discrimination, for example, or violations of equal protection of law, the federal government has plenary authority over immigration, which means if they don't want to allow any foreign students to come in, they don't have to let any foreign students come in. That authority actually comes from Congress. This is not, the president sometimes talks about this as if Article 2 of the Constitution gives him this sweeping authority. Actually, the sweeping authority belongs to Congress, but by statute, it's given very expansive authority to the president. And as long, again, as he treats Harvard like he treats everyone else, or if he doesn't treat Harvard like he treats everyone else, he has a good, valid reason for making distinctions. As long as he doesn't engage in viewpoint discrimination or not enforce the law equally, he's on very strong footing.
But Andy, what if they come back and say, hey, these are private, beside the state schools, these are private institutions. All right, leave me alone. I'm Harvard. I'm Penn State, not Penn State. I'm Long Island University. I'm Hofstra. I'm independent. Don't tell me what I could do.
I think, Brian, that's true with respect to a lot of domestic business decision making. But if you're a foreign person and you want to come into the United States, you need the government's permission. Gotcha. Harvard's permission doesn't do it for you.
Understood. The whole battle and this fighting out. The other thing is about possibly the most consequential question I've asked you so far that affects all our economy is the push to make these lawsuit by small business that the president overstepped his tariff authority and a trade court deciding that he did and now putting the decision on hold. But the minute that trade court decided he did, they lost. I happen to know directly a lot of leverage with the EU and other countries as we try to restructure our trade relationships because they say, hey, you can't do that. You've overstepped your presidential authority. I don't really have to deal with you. So who's right in this case? Because I understand they want the Supreme Court to see it right away.
Yeah, I don't think I thought the trade court's opinion was correct. I don't think the president has the authority under the International Enemy Economic Powers Act, IEPA. There are laws on the books that give the president a lot of tariff authority, but there are a lot of hoops that he has to jump through to comply with those laws. He was trying to do it just the same way he's trying to do with immigration by invoking the Alien Enemies Act. By invoking this law, which doesn't even mention tariffs in it, he was trying to claim sweeping authority to basically set the tariff levels unilaterally on his own without any input from Congress. And the court said that this statute was not meant to convey that kind of authority to the president. So, whether it affects his leverage or not is another story. But if he's invoking authority that he doesn't actually have and that hurts his negotiating position, you shouldn't arrange a negotiating or strategize a negotiating position out of authority that you don't have.
What strategy did you use the first time around that wasn't challenged, but he decided to go a different way this way in his first term?
Well, he has a lot of authority under a variety of statutes with respect to tariffs. But I think in the first term also there was more input from Congress. And in particular, I think that was the case with the Mexican and Canadian deal, which had a lot of back and forth between the administration and Congress. Yeah, here he's trying to go it alone. And that's always tough to do, especially nowadays, because the Supreme Court, they always talk about what Justice Scalia used to say, which is that Congress doesn't hide elephants in mouse holes. In other words, if you're going to exercise or invoke sweeping power, you have to show in the statute that Congress gave you that power, that there's some.
But Andy, correct me here, but what happened the first time when he just said to China, hey, I'm going to up your tariff rate, and he put those tariffs on, and Biden left them there? That wasn't challenged.
Yeah, well, this time it's being challenged, Brian, but he did it in a much more sweeping way this time than he did the last time. And this time it's global. And what you have to cite to trigger a lot of these laws is an actual emergency. What he has said this time around was that trade imbalances are an emergency. If you speak to a lot of economists, particularly conservative economists, they don't think trade balances are a problem at all, because if you have a trade deficit, that means you have an investment surplus. They have to sort of cancel each other out. So there's a lot of debate even among economists about whether this is a problem at all. But the thought that it's such an emergent situation that it has to be dealt with, and the president has to assert unilateral power to impose global tariffs is a very controversial assertion.
I know they were saying more the debt and deficit than trade deficit imbalance as it plays into the deficit, which they say is an emergency, but we'll see. I tell you what, always great to have you on, Andy. Andy McCarthy, thanks so much.